Hello, Garland Nixon here. And, if you've been paying attention to the news, there was these protests called Hands Off, which seemed to be, your traditional, I guess, protest run by the Democrat Party. And I think there could be some more to these protests than meets the eye. Let's talk. Hello, Garland here, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the hands-off protests. Got a few minutes on my hands before my next one. I got an interview at one, um, but the hands-off protests over the weekend, massive protests across the United States, anti-Trump, I think the foundation were anti-Trump and anti-Elon Musk. Let me start by saying this, and that is there are a lot of things there that, as a person who's an old school lefty, that I would certainly agree with. I don't put Medicare, Social Security, or any of the traditional what's called the entitlements, what people like me call the social safety net, things that help the working class and the poor, et cetera. I don't want those to be touched. People who know me know that, when it comes to constitutional rights, I'm very, very strict on my belief about constitutional rights, or unfortunately, they seem to be privileges. We thought they were rights, but if they're rights, you can't take them, can they? So at any rate, in the context of my politics, there's a lot of things there that I could look at and say, sure, I'm for that. Now, the issue of just being anti-Trump or anti-Musk is where I part ways from these people, because I used to say recovering Democrat. I'm a recovered Democrat. I'm to the left of the Democratic Party, and I just see the Democratic Party as part of the machine that wipes out all the things that I consider good. I'm an anti-war person, pro-Constitution person. So, as I said, unfortunately, it's not applied, but I wish the Constitution were applied, right? So here's my point. I'm not a right winger. I'm to the left of the Democratic Party. But I'm highly suspicious of the Democratic Party simply because it has become the party of the intelligence age. Certainly, the Republican Party, I'm not saying that there's not a foundation there that's, the machine, and that's the establishment. That's why I don't belong to either party. But for this particular instance, it seems to me that the Democrats have really aligned themselves strong with the neocon foreign policy machine and the neocon pro-war um, uh, um, uh, international blob, right? Foreign policy blob. More so, here's what I mean. Now, I ain't defending Trump by any stretch of the imagination. I think he lied to people, and he lied to his followers about, how anti-war he was. I think that's already obvious. But my point being, there is an element in the Republican Party that is opposed to war and conflict. I don't know how big it is, but there's an element. There's nothing in the Democratic Party there anymore. And I'm opposed to both parties. I think we need third parties or independents or some kind of revolutionary change. But let's get down to the hands-off thing. Let's start here. The things that made me go, I also want to mention this for people who don't know. I'm a former law enforcement officer. You might not know that. So when I do investigations and start putting things together, I do have a background in that. I was just in the air for transparency purposes. Former police officer, retired as a major, former commander of the investigations division. So while this isn't a major investigation, if somebody's saying this guy doesn't know what the hell he's talking about, this isn't really an investigation. But I know how to look into stuff and how to question stuff. Here's all I would say: we should all be suspicious of when it comes to our government and the things that are going on. How about that's just a start? Let's go. Look at this. So this is the first thing that caught a lot of people's attention. There was this hands-off thing, right? We must stop Trump and Musk's illegal billionaire power grab. The first thing I look at that is, it is the politics of personality. It's Trump and Musk that we must stop. Their billionaire power grab. Well, why is it that there's only some billionaires that are bad and some billionaires that are good? And it becomes what has been referred to as Bonapartism. You know what I mean? Where the billionaires class or the ruling elite say, well, we're going to muster all this huge group of civilians and citizens and working class people on behalf of this faction of the ruling elite. And this faction over here, they're going to muster all of these working class people with their faction of the ruling elite and have those bastards, poor bastards, fight each other before the wars that are going on between various factions of the ruling elite. So basically they're saying it's Trump and Musk is the problem. And people like me say the systemic part of it. We got systemic problems. It's not a particular, look, Biden was there. We were nothing but a war machine. Prices doubled. Everything went bad, right? And we're like, well, that's crappy. Trump comes in, he's starting wars again, and the tariffs, God only knows what's going to happen. Prices, it seems like we're going to deal with some of the same things. So if we just make it a personality issue, we miss the facts on the ground of what's actually happening to affect the working class. Let me continue. What caught my eye and so many people's eye, hands off, and you look right down here, oh, veteran service, oh, libraries, free speech, LGBTQ rights, immigrants, courts, Medicaid, oh, right in the middle. Look at that. Hands off, right in the center, NATO. Hands off NATO. NATO is nothing but a war machine. And traditionally, it has been the US empire's war machine. So now we have a supposedly, allegedly left-leaning coalition that's saying hands off NATO, the people who right now, there's something else you got to notice about that. Let me bring this up, right? As a person who considers if you're going to be on the quote left, it is critical to me to oppose war because one of the reasons, as they say, we can't have nice things is because so much money goes to what, 1,000 bases. We spend what, $1 trillion and a half dollars minimum on war and on coercion around the world. So if you're going to consider yourself some kind of lefty standing up for the little guy, look, you're just pumping all this money into war and NATO. Where is the money for, as they say, Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security and things like that, libraries, and all the things, schools? Where's the money? How, see, you can't say, let's throw all of this money into NATO and war and let's have nice schools, because that's not the way it works, right? Let's continue. So I thought, oh, well, that's interesting. So I thought, let's look into this hands-off business, right? So let's do this. So what I'm going to do is run you through some of the things that I was looking at, and you can see what you think. So first of all, I realized, they've got a website, hands off. And of course, there you go, the politics of personality. Trump, Musk, right? And everything's Trump, Musk. Everything's Trump, Musk. Donald Trump and Elon Musk. You notice this. That's not significantly into policy. It is Trump, Musk, Trump, Musk, Trump, Musk, right? They're standing up against Trump, Musk. They just want different people. So we go to, let's see, there's where everything is, their toolkits, all kind of stuff. Now, here's what I thought. Well, who's behind this? Who's pushing it? Whatever. So if you look down the bottom, it says general inquiries are response@indivisible.org. And I thought, okay, so whoever is behind this is indivisible.org, because it doesn't say response at hands off 2025. See, they've got media advisories, but general inquiries, response@indivisible.org. So I said, okay, that means we got to search indivisible.org. So let's take a look at indivisible.org and see what we find, right? We're going to continue. And we're going to look at indivisible.org. Okay, so you look there and it's all indivisible.org, democracy's under threat, blah, blah, blah. And you look down at Trump, Musk, everything's about Trump, Musk, join our weekly show, make a difference, all this kind of stuff, right? So I said, well, let's see who's behind that, who we are. Okay, that's important. We got to know who we are, right? We want to continue to figure this out. Let's keep looking. About us. Our leadership, that's I want to know. And what you find is their leadership are two people. One of the a woman named Leah Greenberg and Ezra Levin, right? And here's what's interesting about Greenberg and Levin. They're very, very popular amongst the machine. They're not just two putzes. Watch this. Let's do this. Uh, Here's what's interesting about them, about how popular they are. When they got married, look at this. The New York Times literally did an article on these people back in 2015. So they got married in 2015, friends first and always. And look, Leah Francis Greenberg, right, was married to Ezra Philip Levin, and it goes on their life, their fathers, this. Both of them have a history of working in nonprofits, but they all about their mother, where they met, the friendship of their, just a little thing about their life. He kissed me and I was very pleased, Miss Greenberg said, right? Isn't that weird? How many people do you know that just two people happen to meet happen to meet in college, and the New York Times says, hey, let's do an article about Leah and Ezra, right? Okay, let's continue. Let's look a little bit more. We're going to go back to the two of them, and let's start with Leah Greenberg. I want to start with her for a reason. Leah Greenberg. So these are the people behind indivisible.org. These are the anti-Trump people, which is fine if you don't like Trump. I'm not a pro-Trump guy. I'm about policy, though. Policy. They just are mostly Trump, 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 Trump. Let's take a look at Greenberg. Let's figure out who she is. Leah Greenberg. She's the co-founder and co-executive director of the Indivisible Project. Prior to founding the Indivisible Project, she served as policy director for the Tom Perello for Governor of Virginia campaign. She also worked for Tom Perello. Now they have that. What's interesting is they don't have that. When Tom Perello went to Congress, she worked on his campaign, right? Just before we go any further. So she worked for Tom Perello, right? Let's look and see who Tom Perello is before we go further. So she worked for him, and she worked for him again when he was in Congress. How about this? Soros' foundation's top man, one of the most important operatives in the progressive advocacy universe, supporting the Biden administration policy objectives, is leaving his perch. Tom Perello, the executive director of Open Society Foundations, will be departing from the role in mid-July. Let's go back. So Tom Perello was the executive director of the Open Society Foundations for George Soros, right? All right. Who is Tom Perello again, and who is Leah Greenberg again? Okay, let me go here. You'll find the shopping to find. Leah Greenberg is a co-founder, blah, blah, blah. Prior to the individual, she served as policy director for the Tom Perello of Governor of Virginia. So she worked for the guy who was the executive director of Open Society Foundation. Now, not that that means anything. As a former investigator, here's what I'll say. That is not definitive proof of anything. The only thing it's definitive proof of is that she worked for him. What that means, I don't know. Now, let's continue. She has managed human trafficking grants and programs as an investment management for Humanity United, served as an advisor to the State Department's quadrennial diplomacy, the U.S. State Department review, and worked on Capitol Hill for Congressman Tom Perello. So she has a long history. When Tom Perello was running for governor, Leah Greenberg was by his side. She worked on Capitol Hill. When Congressman Tom Perello made it to Congress, Leah Goldberg was by his side. Oh, by the way, did I mention that she was an advisor to the U.S. State Department? I can see where she found her love for NATO, at the U.S. State Department. Now, the other thing that's interesting is, and you got to say this, how beloved she is by the system. The machine loves her and Ezra. Along with her co-founder and spouse, Ezra Levin, Leah has been featured as one of Time's 100 most influential people of 2019, included on GQ's 50 most powerful people in Trump's Washington, and ranked number 2 on the Politico, 50 list of top thinkers, doers, and visionaries transforming American politics. So add this to it. Time magazine loves her. GQ magazine loves her. Politico put her #2 on the top 50 list of thinkers. And by the way, did I mention that when her and Ezra got married, just out of the blue, for no reason, the New York Times did an article on their marriage. Hey, look at this. Like they do, just two people meet and fall in love. And the New York Times, just does an article about them and how wonderful it is. Oh, what a wonderful group. Isn't that nice? I feel so good. I feel special. Now, so I wanted to focus on that. Let me see. As far as Levin, just so you know who these guys, I wouldn't want poor little Ezra Levin to feel left out. Well, look at him, co-founder. He was the associate director of federal policy for Prosperity Now, an anti-poverty nonprofit. He was a deputy director for Congressman Lloyd Doggett, field director for Doggett's reelection campaign, AmeriCorps. He was with AmeriCorps. He has also been featured as one of Time's 100 most influential people of 2019, GQ's 50 most powerful, and ranked #2. Both of them #2 on Politico. So this is a couple who the machine sees as putting them at the top, right? He's appeared as a commentator and been interviewed on MSNBC, CNN, NPR, Pod Save America, the New York Times, the Washington Post, Political, Time Magazine, the New York, The Nation, Slate, Rolling Stone, among others, right? So we can look at them and we can say, oh, wow, that's real interesting. He's beloved by the machine, and she is a former State Department advisor who has a long career with the guy who was literally the executive director of the Open Society Foundation. Now, my research, I found some things that implied that Indivisible had gotten $7.6 million from the Open Society Foundation, but I don't know that for sure. I wasn't able to confirm it. So take that with a grain of salt. Understand that there is evidence out on there are allegations out on the internet that Indivisible.org had over $11 million, 11.4 million or something, and 7.6 million they had gotten from the Open Society Foundation. I would say this: don't take that as being definitive. I would say research that. If you can find more on that, send it back to me. But, I don't know. So I'm not saying for sure but it wouldn't surprise. I'm just saying it wouldn't surprise me because of the connections to, the direct connections. Let's face it. When you literally had a long career almost working for the guy who's the executive director of Open Society Foundation, and you want to do, I don't know, color revolution protest right here in America, just throwing it out there, you may be able to access some money, but it's not definitive. Please, I would advise you to continue to research and see if anybody can find anything more definitive. Now, let's also look at something else on Indivisible that I think is worth reading. I went on there and I said, well, let me search. They got a little search bar. Let's search Ukraine and see what we find. There we go. Indivisible on the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Let's read it. Today, Individual's co-founder and executive director released the following statement. This morning, we are all watching Russia's brutal invasion of Ukraine, a democratic country, particularly after 2014, in horror. This is not a situation in which there are two sides. There's no justification for this act of aggression other than 2014. Ukrainian leaders and the international community have been engaged in extensive diplomatic efforts to prevent this sort of escalation. Well, that's just a lie. The United States government refused to negotiate when the Russians specifically sent them something in writing asking for negotiations, and the U.S. State Department said that's not even a starting point. But let's continue. While Putin has rejected all efforts of diplomacy, that is just a lie. The Russians asked for diplomacy. Russia's actions are a series of horrific, violent aggressions led by Putin and his oligarchs. The terrible human cost of this escalating conflict is the direct result of their aggression. We recognize and are grateful for the Biden administration's tireless efforts to avert this wholly unnecessary war. The Biden administration tried to stop the war, according to Indivisible.org. We now urge him and international leaders to lead a coordinated multilateral response to Russia's actions, driving towards de-escalation and an immediate ceasefire. Where do we heard that? As well as humanitarian efforts to support refugees. There should be no military action without congressional approval. Our hearts are with the people of Ukraine. So there you go. If you were wondering what in the world these people had to say about it, there you go. Now, what's interesting, May 13, 2021, they had some things to say about Israel. We are horrified by the rising violence in Palestine. Let me see. If you look at it, they'll talk a lot about it, but they don't get into the details. Let me see. They start off by this individual statement. Individuals join the global community expressing our horror and grief at the loss. Now listen to this. When you hear their statement on Israel and Palestine, individuals join the global community expressing our horror and grief at the loss of over 1,400 Israelis, Americans, and foreign citizens in Hamas attacks on October 7th, and echoed calls for all hostages to be released immediately. Boy, they're on top of it. I'm telling you right now, they are out for justice. When it comes to that, they are horrified by the fact that Israel was attacked on October 7th. Look, I think one or two things have happened since then that perhaps could be discussed also, right? So now, while they talk about it, they talk about, let me there's a way that people talk about this thing. Let me add this a little bit. Let me add a little bit more to it so you can see this. In the more than 6 months since the humanitarian situation in Gaza has deteriorated catastrophically with Israel's ongoing bombardment and blockade of life-sustaining supplies, to date, more than 30,000 Palestinians have been killed, 2/3 of them women and children. We're horrified by the situation, heartbroken at the human cause below us. So here's the bottom line. They start off right off the bat. There we go. There's their statement. It always start off with, today we mourn the Israeli, American, other lives taken in Hamas's horrific attack. Those who lost their lives, family were taken hostage, have been killed since, and those who remain in captivity. We join with the families of remaining hostages in calling for their immediate release. We recognize the pain of this day for our Jewish community and members, compounded by the rise in anti-Semitism around the world in the years. And so the focus on their statements is October 7th, anti-Semitism, things of that nature. I find it interesting. That's all I'm saying. I find it interesting that they're very pro-NATO, that their background, the one woman, her background is with the U.S. State Department, that they've been with NGOs their whole life, that they're beloved by, the machine, the New York Times. I'm just so suspicious when the New York Times, when just two schlumps get married, who set that up? You know what I mean? Somebody had to set that up. Somebody had to say, the New York Times just didn't wake up and say, hey, two people get married. Hey, quick, let's do an article on it. It seems to me that they are involved in depth in operations. And the fact that this is a very pro-NATO protest, the fact that, let's do this. Let's also look at something else, right? Let's do this. Let's go back to hands off, because they have sponsors, right? Let's go back to hands off. Okay. And they got partners. Let's look at their partners. How about their partner list, right? Activate America, Tax Fairness. See, these are all their partners. Community Change. Let's see. Here's an interesting one. Bend the Arc, Jewish Action, Bulletproof Pride, whatever that means. Debt Collect. There's a lot of these are all a lot of, and some of them are Move On, what have you, are organizations related to the Democratic Party, which is nothing wrong with that. Look, this is a anti-Trump thing. I would expect the Democrats to be up to their ears in it. Wouldn't expect the State Department, but I would expect the Democrats to be up to their ears in this thing. So I'm not saying that because the Maryland League of Conservation Voters are in, nah, it's nothing suspicious there, or all of these groups. But I'm just saying, within these kind of groups, you know what I mean? I really suspect that if you start going through these groups, let's take a look at one just for the heck of it. Okay. Bend the Arc. We're going to look at Bend the Arc. Bend the Arc.us. Let's take a peep at just one of them because they apparently do a lot of Jewish activism stuff, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying it's anything wrong, but so here's one of their allies, Bend the Arc, right? Okay. And Bend the Arc is a multiracial, multi movement of Jews and allies across the country, right? So you got Rise Up in Solidarity, Sanctuary Cities. What's interesting, Sanctuary Cities, Trump fueled arrest of Mahmoud Khalil endangers Jews. There's nothing wrong with that. There we go. They're all over all over the hands-off stuff. Well, look at their latest stuff. It's hands-off. There's Jamie Raskin, anti-Semitic stuff. What's interesting is Bend the Arc is a Jewish organization. It doesn't have anything at all about Israel. Just has some stuff about anti-Semitism. No foreign policy. What I think one of the interesting things too about hands off, when you look at the partners, right? I didn't find very little about foreign policy. I mean, good luck finding anything about Gaza, Iran, really Ukraine, any of the foreign. Look at this. If you look at it, so this is supposedly hands off a lefty thing, right? Supposedly it's lefties, hands off, we're about Trump. But look down here, you'll find activated, whatever that is. You'll find unions, that's fine. National Arab American Institute, I don't know what's going on with that. Center for Common Ground, but you'll find all kinds of stuff. Lots of stuff in Citizens United. You'd expect to find that. Greenpeace, but foreign policy, Organized Revolution, Oil Change International, whatever the hell that is, People for the American Way, Pride at Work. Look all through here. Rainbow Push, Reproductive Youth, lots of things that you would expect to find, right? I'm looking, I'm sure somewhere in here is something to do with foreign policy. Resistance, Side with Love, the Chamberlain Network, I don't know what the hell that is. Roots Action, I know what that is. Lots of stuff. What's interesting is this, look at this, Rev Up right here. See that thing that says Rev Up? A lot of things are similar. You go down here, Women Forward, a lot of these things look similar a lot of times, but there's a lot of, let me just say this, there's a lot of things that are done that are red, white, and blue and look similar. So there's nothing weird about that. But no matter how much I look, paid leave for all, I'm all for that. National Women's Political Caucus, I'm still looking. Empower Action, Conservative, LWV. No matter how much I look, I'm sure there's something in here that's anti-free press action. I'm looking for something that's anti-war. Somewhere in here, I would think that in this day and age, with what's going on in Ukraine, right? Hopefully you're looking over this with me, that somewhere in here, Eco Reformers Movement, Engage, Action, E-Engage, Action, Color of Change, Common Cause. I'm looking. I'm looking. I'm looking. Why don't we do this? I'll just search one, okay? EMGAGE, Engage Action. Let's look at Engage Action. No, let's find a different one. Oh, I've already looked at that one. Let's look up, I don't know. Oh, there's some, I'm just looking through them here. I'm looking through, trying to find one. There's so many. You know, that's the way the brain works. Here's one. Activate America. All right, here's one. Let's look at it. Just pick one out of the blue and we'll look at it for just to see what happens. Activate America. There we go. There's your hands-off protest. T races. That's fine. USA, save children, save USAID. Ooh, provides life-saving food and medicine to desperate children around the world. Yeah, provides regime change color operations and overthrows government. So there you go. Activate America wants to save USAID. Why do I feel like if I start going through a lot of these, this is the kind of stuff I'll find, right? Still matters. Paid for by Activate America. Let's see, about our history, our team. There we go. There's their team. So bottom line is this. I'm not going to stay on this forever. I'm just saying, I would advise somebody, what I would advise you to do is just, I don't have time right now. Go to those groups. The unions are probably going to be a waste of time. And the ones you've heard of, Greenpeace, you know what they are. But the ones you've never heard of, go to those and search through those. And I'm sure you'll find a lot of, we've got to save USAID. God bless the intelligence community. State Department, we love you. You know, that kind of stuff, right? And as I said, there's a lot of stuff there that says, okay, we're all for the Democratic Party or elect Democrats. That's expected. There's nothing wrong with that. That's not wrong. This is a party. This is a group of protests that are directly tied to the Democratic Party, and they're not trying to hide it. So that's fine. If the Republicans do something, they say, hey, there's a lot of Republicans and we hate whoever, Biden or Soros or whoever. Look, that's a given. They're up front. So this is a Democratic blue, whatever. Somebody said Act Blue. Well, Act Blue is Democrats. There's nothing wrong with Act Blue, which is a Democratic a portal for payment, right? But there's nothing wrong with that being a part of this simply because this is a Democratic operation, and you would expect Act Blue. You would expect a lot of organizations that I look at and I say, I would expect them to be involved. I don't see anything wrong with it. I may disagree with them saying hands off NATO, but I don't disagree with their right to say hands off NATO or hands off whatever they're saying, right? So the usual suspects should probably be in there, and there's nothing wrong inherently with that. I think it is interesting, though, to go through these and to find that the indivisible.org group that was behind, seemed to be behind the whole hands off protest, that one of the founders of that was an advisor for the State Department and worked for the executive director of the Open Society Foundation. One could look at that and be suspicious. It may mean nothing, but it may mean everything. Garland Nixon here. Look, I'm out of here. Got to run. Got something going on at 1 o'clock that I got to do a Zoom meeting for some people that are working for peace. And you know me, I'm always working for peace. So do me a favor. This is share this on all your social media platforms. I don't know if there's a whole lot to it. Maybe some people might want to look into it. I would advise you, if you're watching this, to go to Hands Off, to go to their partners, and to start going to their websites, to click on their home, their about, what they're doing, what their programs are. And when you look at their executive directors and the people on their boards, start looking at do some searches on them online, see what their backgrounds are, and see what you'll find. Probably a whole lot of lovers of USAID. They don't care if they fire all the people at the Department of Agriculture, as long as they keep those people at USAID, because that's what they're all about. Thanks a lot, everybody. Might I add, am I such an idiot? I forgot to put my banner up. Where's my banner? Follow me at Rockfin. Follow me on Telegram. Follow me on Rumble. If you can afford it, become a Patreon member, or certainly you can go to PayPal. Buymeacoffee.com is always great. All you got to do is say, buy Garland a coffee. How much? 5 beans per coffee. How many? However many you want. And at the bottom, you can click monthly to make it a monthly donation, or it can be one time. That's up to you. So Buy Me a Coffee is great. Certainly, Cash App info is there. If you can afford to help the channel, that's great. If you can't, it doesn't matter whether you can or can't. Enjoy it. What you can do is share it on all your social media platforms so other people can watch this. Thanks a lot, everybody, all my dear and fluffy friends. Do we have any? I don't see any super chats or super stickers that I need to answer. So thanks a lot, everybody. Have a wonderful time. Don't forget to share this. I'm out.